Okay, let's do this. Let's talk about CEX. Alright everyone, hope you are doing well. Thanks for pressing play once again. I'm the man they call Pixel Paul, and I'm here today to talk about CEX. Some people call it CEX, some people call it CEX. It's also known as Complete Entertainment Exchange, but I know it as CEX. And I don't think there's anybody in this gaming community really that doesn't know about CEX. If you don't know about CEX, or if you're from a different country, CEX is a store in the UK and other countries that sells entertainment, games, DVDs, Blu-rays, music and electrical equipment, laptops, cameras, all that jazz. We all know what CEX is. We talk about it often enough, and for that reason, this video, I wasn't sure whether to do it or not, because in general, I don't tend to talk about CEX too much. I'll reference CEX in my videos in terms of prices and that sort of thing, and I do gaming hauls from CEX, but I don't tend to do huge amount of talking about CEX itself. I also don't tend to do many kind of videos like this where it's my personal opinion either. I just tend not to give it. I just kind of possibly sit on the fence a little bit. So I'm going against the grain a little bit here. But I just thought, why not? I know everybody else is talking about CEX. You put on YouTube at the moment, and pretty much every thumbnail or every other thumbnail you see has the big CEX logo on the front of it. It's a crowded topic, but I just thought, well, I'm going to throw my two pence in as well. So, what do I want to talk about CEX? Well, I'm not going to be here to just, slag off CEX. I like CEX personally. The stores that I have around me are, in general, pretty good. So, I want to give a bit of a balanced view on this. I want to look at the good things, and I'll look at some of the bad things as well. So, let's get straight into it. So, like I said, there's good points and bad points about CEX at the moment. Obviously, over the last few years, CEX has grown massively. I think there's something like 390 or just under 400 stores in the UK now, which, when you think about it, really, in this sort of day and age of the high street and stores, that many stores across the country, and that has grown, is quite a lot, really. So CEX is obviously a store that is, it's on the rise, or has it risen? But it's quite a mainstay of the UK high street. I mean, CEX's first store was in the early 90s, I think, a small shop on its own. And it's just grown massively. And I'll say it's grown massively. I'm sure I read something about its net worth is around 17 million, something like that. Now, if you compare that to like Game, which I think is currently about 27 million, Game's struggling as well at the moment. So Game is still kind of, its net worth is still a lot bigger than CEX. So CEX is kind of, although we would maybe class it now as the dominant sort of force in game collecting and gaming, if you like, on the high street, it's still quite a relatively small company in sort of relative terms. Having said that, it's something that's expanding, and 390 stores in the UK, there's stores in Ireland, there's even stores in places like Spain, and I'm sure they said there was something like 30 stores in Mexico. So, CEX isn't now just a UK thing, it's starting to branch worldwide. So, yeah, in terms of growth, it's got bigger and bigger. And obviously, we talk about, as game collectors on YouTube, we talk about CEX a lot. And it gets, I suppose it has some reputation with certain things. But like I said before, I kind of want to do a bit of a balanced look at this a little bit. So I'm going to start off with what I think are sort of like the good points of CEX. So cheers, everyone. Right, so the good points of CEX. And, there are the good points of CEX. There are plenty of them. But I picked a few out. And the first being that, like I said before, 390 stores now in the UK. So any town you go into, the vast majority of towns that you go to now will have a CEX. And if you're a gamer collector, then it's the first place that you will make a beeline to. I know I personally, if I am going to a certain town that maybe I've never been to before, if I've been to it before, the first thing I will do is see if there is a CEX. And 9 times out of 10, there will be one there. And it will be the one shop that I go to first, because that's what I like to look at. And these days we aren't blessed with a huge amount of choice on the high street to look for games. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of indie game sellers out there now as well. There's loads of good sellers around the country, and I think there's more coming as well. There's more independent game sellers coming into the business too, which is fantastic, and I personally kind of prefer. But if you are looking for something specific, if you're looking for a game shop on the high street, CEX is where you're going to end up usually. I know you have places like cash converters, cash generators as well. You also have game, kind of, but I mean, unless you're looking for maybe like new releases, you can find them cheaper than game. Game is there as well. But in terms of where any other place to pick up games, unless you have a dedicated independent seller, CEX is the place that you're going to end up. Don't get me started on charity shops, because that, for me anyway, around here now is just it doesn't even come into the equation these days, even though I still look. So CEX, it's everywhere, and that's what we want. We want games on the high street, don't we? While physical games are still here, while they're still existing, while they're still being produced, then we want them on the high street, really, ideally. So yeah, the fact that they are available across the country is a good thing. They usually also have a reasonable level of stock as well, and whatever game system you are looking for, you are usually pretty well catered for in every CEX stock, in every CEX shop. Every console that you can think of tends to be there now. There's only very few sort of niche consoles where they don't particularly sell games, many of them. I'm thinking things like Virtual Boy, perhaps, maybe even like Jaguar games. You might get the occasional game like that in the sort of glass cabinets of dreams and that sort of thing, but there's not much that they don't sell or you can't find in CEX. Ultra rare stuff, obviously, is a little bit different, but in general, you can't complain with the sort of stock levels that CEX has. I know in my local CEXs, stock levels for some stores kind of does fluctuate quite a lot, and I think I mentioned it recently about one of the stores had very little in the way of PlayStation 2 games. That's not necessarily their fault though. If people aren't trading those games in, then that affects what stock that they've got in. But in general, most of the CEX stores are pretty well stocked, and that's what then brings me on to the next point. I mean, the app for CEX is great. It is. It's such a great tool to have and to use. If you suddenly think of a game and you want to know how much it's going for, you immediately go to the CEX app and see how much it is and where they've got it in stock. So the CEX app itself is, it's a really useful thing, and it's something possibly 20 years ago we wouldn't have even dreamed of having something like that, obviously, because smartphone technology has changed a lot as well. But having that kind of library of information and prices and availability like that is just it's really good, and it is a good thing. The app, it does help, especially people who are looking to flip as well. I know some of the other YouTubers who go into the charity shops, see games, straight away they'll scan it to see what kind of price they get. So the app itself is such a huge sort of thing. It's a huge part of the CEX experience at the moment. And another thing that sort of struck me recently, maybe in the last year or two, well, certainly the last 18 months, is and this is, I can only again go off my own sort of viewpoint from my local CEXs, of which I've probably got sort of 4 or maybe 5 that are sort of like within reasonable sort of travelling distance. In-store experience has changed, so they have gone past those days where CEX was a grubby, smelly, dark kind of shop. It has. I know there's still some out there that aren't great, but in general, I think CEX in-store has cleaned up its act. They have quite a nice kind of branding going on in those shops now. There's kind of a uniformity to it, and as well. And in general, most of the ones I go in now are pretty clean. Stock, we'll go on to that in a bit. It can be slightly different, but in general, the stores themselves can be pretty clean. I know sort of behind the counters and behind the scenes, sometimes it can look a bit of a mess. But in general, they have tried to kind of tidy up their image of their in-store experience, if you like. So you got to give them credit for that as well. There aren't many CEX stores that I've sort of walked into and thought, I don't want to be in here. And I couldn't have said that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, possibly. In general, they have sort of cleaned up their act, and they have now given sort of that priority, I think, in most stores to games. Games are now, although they're probably not the most profitable, possibly, I would say probably sales of hardware and laptops and that kind of entertainment equipment or electronic equipment probably brings them more money in overall, I'm guessing here. But I think games is probably their number one quantity of sales. I think it's become such a focal point for the gaming community now, CEX. So the fact that they've kind of now given games the focal point of most of the stores, really. Most of the stores I go in now, I mean, I'm thinking of like Bolton as an example. So Bolton's is spread over 2 floors, and it used to be that DVDs were downstairs and games were tucked away upstairs and forgotten about a little bit. Whereas now it's completely different. Games are front and centre, everything downstairs, DVDs upstairs. And it makes sense because, if games are the biggest seller, it should have that sort of priority space in a way. DVDs, obviously, I mean, they probably make quite a profit on DVDs because in general, when people bring them in, they give, like a penny and probably sell them for £1. So I suppose they do maybe make money on that eventually. But, it's a bit of a dying thing now, buying DVDs and Blu-rays. A lot of people still do, obviously. A lot of people still collect them as well. But I can't imagine that it's their biggest profit maker, if you like. I'd be surprised, but I could be wrong again. So it's nice that they've given gaming the sort of priority shelf space or floor space in their stores now. So that's the good stuff, and there's probably other good stuff as well. I mean, like I said before, there are good shops, there are good CEX stores, there are bad CEX stores. In general, I'm quite lucky to have some pretty decent ones around me. But I know other people's experience is wildly different, wildly inconsistent. They can go to one store in one town, they'll go 5 minutes down the road to the next town and have a completely different experience. And I've seen quite a few videos recently of people talking about CEX and their experiences, and they are generally negative. And you see and you kind of understand and you think, do you know what? I've kind of experienced something quite similar to that. And it's a shame. And it's these sort of things which let CEX down. And I'm going to touch on some of those things that I think let them down and things that I think that they need to improve. So I think the first one, and I think, again, most people who shop there, who buys there, or mainly traders probably, people who go in and flip stuff will know of this one. And it's that inconsistency when it comes to trading games in. So you can take a game in, you can take a stack of games in, and they will be in perfect condition. And 9 times out of 10, there will be one of those games that they will find and they will say, can't take that one, it's scratched. And you'll know that there's no scratch on it, or it's a minor sort of scuff or something like that. And for some reason, whatever reason, they just won't take it. Then you can go to that same, another store 5 minutes down the road and they'll just take it, no questions asked. That shouldn't really be happening. Now, especially when you were looking at a disc, say like the only time it sort of happened to me was I was trying to trade in a copy of, I think it was Ember on the PlayStation 4. There was the smallest little kind of scuff, which when you gave it a wipe, it came off pretty much. But it played and it was perfectly fine. I tested it and it was fine. Took it to CEX, they wouldn't take it. So I went the next day to a different one and they took it without any question. Just looked at it over and just took it. And it's that inconsistency, and I know that's down to possibly to individuals, but it's not helpful. It's not great, and it just comes across as being picky in a way. And what I think gets people's backs up even more is the fact that you can get a game like that rejected, which is near perfect, and they'll quite happily though sell you a game which looks like it's been used for ice skating on. I've got games in there that I've picked up from CEX, usually cheap ones, but they just look awful, and they don't play. And you just think, well, someone's brought that in, someone's traded it in, and you've took it, you've accepted it. So is it because it's a cheap one? I don't know. So that's one thing that really grinds my gears, is that just again, it could come down to individual members of staff. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem right that they can just pick and choose what they want. Maybe, I don't know. If you're bringing it in to trade, just get it traded. But anyway, so the next thing that kind of, I suppose, relates to that a little bit is, now I don't do online shopping with CEX that often. I personally, I don't want to say it's a trust thing or anything like that, but I personally just prefer to be able to go in, see what I'm getting, and walk away with it happy or leave it. And the online store, and we all know the term CEX lottery, CEX roulette, it's there for a reason. It's because a lot of the time you just don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what copy you're going to get from which store. And it's the state of some of those games that they arrive in and the way they're packaged is, again, it's just not good enough. Again, it's inconsistent. I mean, you can get a game, you could get like a PlayStation 2 game sent to you, and it'll come in a box with all that brown wrapping, excessive amount of wrapping to it possibly, and you'll think, well, God, this is a big box for just one game, but it's protected and they've taken a bit of care. But then you could order something like a PlayStation 1 game in one of those brittle boxes, a Dreamcast game in one of those cases, and it'll come in just like a cardboard envelope and it'll be smashed to bits. How can that be right? If you've got something that is going to be breakable, it's got to go into proper packaging, especially, and I'm moving on to the next thing that irks me, when you're paying or being paid a fee to post it. So that's my next thing, and everybody talks about this, and it's one of the things that stops me from buying stuff online, because I just think it's in this day and age, it's just a rip-off, really. So it's the £2, it is still £2.95 charge for posting individual orders. It seems crazy. If you order 3 games, you pay 3 lots of postage. It just seems utter madness these days. Every other place, every other online service, they'll either offer you free postage, or if you buy so much, you'll get free postage. It just seems mad that they just charge that £2.95 flat rate for each individual item. And there must be reasons for it. I'm assuming they will give reasons for it. But again, it's just one of those things. And it personally, for me, it puts me off from buying games, because I don't think I've only ever made 3 online purchases from CEX. And to be fair, they were all okay. But I don't think I don't think I could justify paying like for a £3 game and then paying £3 postage on top of it as well. It just seems crazy that. The games that I've bought have been slightly more expensive, and you know what my sort of expensive class is as. So £3 seems, at least it's a small add-on to the larger amount that I've paid out. But I still think these days they should be probably providing, I don't know. I still think maybe £3 is just excessive, especially when you see how it's come packaged sometimes. And it's something that they genuinely need to look at, because I do think it's probably costing them some business, really, because I think a lot of people are put off by that. So, moving on. And again, this is purely based on 1 or 2 stores that I sort of visit. And it's the in-store experience again. And whilst I think the in-store experience is great, and I love looking and browsing for games, one of the things that puts me off from actually buying games sometimes is queue times in some of the stores. Now again, you can go into a CEX store and it'll be empty and you'll be served straight away. Sometimes when it's that little bit busier, it can take forever to get served. And I know this is down to staffing levels, and it goes back to what I said before. CEX is not a huge, massive, customer service driven company. I know it's not. But how many times have you gone into a CEX and you'll have seen 5, 6 staff maybe behind the counters? I know they're all doing certain jobs. Some people are testing, some people filing, you'll have someone serving. But there just seems to be so many times when, and again, I'm not going to mention specific stores, but I know there's one store where I go in maybe once a week, possibly, and quite a few times I will have a look around. I'll spot something I think I'll buy, and I'll walk away without it because the queues are just huge, and it's because there's just not enough people serving. And again, you'll see people darted around all behind the counters, and not one of them sort of thinks, right, well, I'll take 2 minutes to just go and serve this person. Now I get it. There's, there's an element of roulette for them as well. If someone walks up to the counter, you're either going to get someone who's buying a game and it's a 2 minute sale, or you're going to get someone who's going in and saying, so I'm interested in this phone, and they'll be spending, 30 minutes with this person, browsing through phones and trying to give them technical advice and all that sort of thing. So I know there is an element of jeopardy sometimes for the staff, but I don't know. Do more of the stores need just someone dedicated to, straightforward purchases? I don't know, but it just seems to be something that's on the rise with some of the stores now, is that the queue times are just horrendous. And again, it kind of just spoils that fun of going in and finding something and then thinking, oh, God, I've got to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes queuing here. Maybe it's just maybe it's a picky thing. Maybe it's modern day problems or whatever. Should you be waiting that long though to get served? Especially when you see people sort of walking around behind. No, I don't think so personally. So my other two gripes, and to a certain extent, one of these is kind of out of CEX's control. So the one thing with CEX at the moment that it just doesn't quite sit sort of well with me. And this will sound weird because of what I sort of said before about things like the app and that, but it just never quite sits right with me that CEX now has kind of overarching power of the pricing structure of games these days. It just everything price wise is now centered around CEX. You go to a car boot sale now, and people will say, you'll find a game on the table or whatever, and people will straight away look at the app and CEX app and say, right, so I want 20 quid for that, and it's a £5 game because they've seen how much it is in CEX. They've upped the price a little bit, and I don't know, maybe I'm quite old school, but I remember a time when pricing of games and older games was set by you. You used to set the price of the games. They were worth whatever you wanted to sell them for, or what other people were willing to buy them for. And now everything is centered around CEX. Now I suppose that has good points and bad points. It gives everybody some sort of yardstick to aim for, perhaps. But I don't know. I don't know whether, and I think it's because of the fluctuations with prices as well. It makes me feel a little bit like older games are now becoming more of a commodity, almost part of a transaction rather than something that should be treasured and collected and kept and played and enjoyed. I don't know. I just don't know whether the whole sort of CEX pricing monopoly has made games, or certain games and certain systems and things like that, whether it's become a money spinner. And I just don't like that personally. I'm not saying, people who do flip games to make profit and to be able to buy other games, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but you are sort of seeing it more and more these days where, I don't know, it just feels like it's just become more of a transaction, a commodity. There's no sort of sense of excitement for some people now, I guess. It's all about the coin, it's all about the profit, it's all about the flipping. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but just for me, from the perspective of someone who doesn't sell many games, and I actually get regret when I sell games in some ways. I will deliberate. I mean, I've got a pile of games up there that I'm thinking about trading in, but they've been sat there for 2 weeks because I'm deliberating over, well, I might play it again. Do I want to get rid of it? Would I be able to buy it again? I don't know. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me being too old school. But yeah, having that sort of monopoly over the prices of games, and fair play to the indie sellers as well who do their own thing. And I have a lot of respect for those. And, they do it either one of, two ways. Some will try and undercut CEX, which is great. Some will price their games a little bit above CEX because that's where they need to do that at that price because that's their profit margin. That's how they make their money. That's how they survive. That's how they thrive. And that's how some of them, last for 30 plus years by doing that. They've always had their own prices and they've stuck to that regardless of CEX. And I admire that as well. But yeah, it's just something that doesn't quite sort of sit right with me. The whole monopoly of the prices of games. I just sort of miss the days of, we would sell games for the price that we want to sell them for. And I know you can do it on eBay as well, but eBay and Vinted and things like that are just like the Wild West these days. You never quite know what you're going to get. There's loads of jeopardy with buying them on Vinted especially. So yeah, it's just one of those things that irks me a little bit. And then the last thing, and this is the one thing that I've sort of started to feel quite sort of passionately about, and it's just from a few experiences from seeing it more actually in different stores around the Northwest mainly, not necessarily my sort of local ones, but it's the treatment of the your older retro games now. Every passing year these games are getting older and older, harder to find in great condition, and there are just some stores that just lack that little bit of care with some of their retro stock. So I'm talking about Nintendo boxed stuff, even Mega Drive stuff, Sega Saturn boxes, that sort of thing. There are just some stores where you will just see them piled up in the glass cabinets, obviously, so they are protected from grubby hands and people thieving them and that sort of thing. But there's just some stores which are just now starting to lack a little bit of care with these games. And these are old games now. These are hard to come by games, some of these. And for a lot of the time, they're high value games as well. And I just think it's something they need to start to consider just a little bit more, how these games, because they are, I don't know if it's the right word, but they're almost like custodians of these games now, and they need to take a little bit more care. Now, again, don't get me wrong, there are some CEX stores which go above and beyond with their retro stock. You'll see Super Nintendo, N64 games in box protectors, well looked after. They're not in the front window with sun shining on them all day long. Some stores really do go to town with the retro stock, and with the sort of glass cabinets as well. Some of them are really, really well presented. I will name one store, Warrington, because I think their retro glass cabinet is absolutely fantastic. I think they do a great job of displaying it so you can see what prices are. They're not stacked up on each other. They're well presented, well looked after, box protectors with some stuff, kept out of the sun. And I think they do a really good display, but also look after those games as well. But there are just some other stores which, it just feels like they're not looking after some of these games. And you see that, when your PlayStation 1 games, Dreamcast games are sent in the post, and it's just into a cardboard envelope and off they go. And that's something that they need to improve on, I think, personally. Now, how they do that, most of them have plenty of sort of shelf space to be able to do something a bit proper and, to look after them. I don't know, maybe they even need to look at possibly bringing in game collectors, people who know the games and the best way to look after them. I'm not one of those people personally. I'm not an expert or anything like that, but people who could help them arrange their sort of their cabinets and make sure that these games are being looked after. It makes it sound almost like it's a museum, but I mean, to a certain extent, it almost is a little bit. Some of the games are absolutely nearly 40 years old, some of them now. We're not getting far off that. So yeah, that's the one thing I'm just starting to see. One or two places, retro games just not being stored and properly kind of looked after in CEX stores. I just think they could do more with that, and I hope they do. Now, there is one more thing, one more sort of area with CEX that does get on my nerves, but I have spoken about this before. I did a whole nearly a whole video on this months and months ago. Yes, I offered my opinion on one of my videos, believe it or not. But yeah, it was CEX, and it was around cover reprints. Now, that is one of the things that really does frustrate me. The sort of cover reprints, the fact that they will charge the same prices for cover reprints as they will do for normal cases, normal versions. Yeah, that's something that they seriously still need to look at. And I know there's experiences now of people being sort of receiving cover reprints that aren't necessarily badged as cover reprints as well. You know, they're almost like fake covers. So that's something they need to get a handle of, definitely. I'm not I don't want to go into too much detail on that on this video, because I have done another video on that before. I'll put a link to it, and you can check it out if you want to. But yeah, that was just one other thing that sort of sprung to mind. So that is pretty much it. I've spoke my mind, which I don't do very often, and it was quite nice actually. Quite enjoyed just unloading certain ideas and things. And you know, like I said before, I don't not like CEX, and I quite like going into CEX stores. But there are definitely things that they can do better. There are good things that they can build on. But whether they need to do it, I don't know. It's entirely up to them, I suppose. You know, they've gone on this long, they've survived this long, they're expanding obviously into different countries and more stores. So maybe they're just quite happy to go along with the way things are. But I think if they don't change one or two things, and I think in the last couple of months possibly, I've seen more and more sort of negative comments. There's always been negative comments about CEX, but I'm just starting to see more and more people get more and more frustrated with CEX. And it's little things that they could change, which would probably make a big difference and keep us as game collectors, you know, in their customer base. But there are people now who are just, you know, completely saying, no, don't trust CEX anymore. I'm not going to them. I'm done. And it's a shame in a way, but yeah, I mean, like I said before, good things, bad things. I love CEX. I occasionally hate CEX, but let me know in the comments. I'm sure you probably will, because I know there is a rabid fan base, fan base of CEX. So a lot of people who are absolutely huge, dedicated fans of CEX, but there are also people on the other side of the fence who are, just will not go into stores, will not buy online. So let me know in the comments what you thought of some of the stuff I've said. Maybe it's just utter rubbish. If it is, let me know. But if you agree with some of it, let me know as well. Make me feel a little bit better. But anyway, hope you enjoyed me rambling on, as always. Sorry, no games to show you this week. That'll be this weekend, though, hopefully. From CEX. Wouldn't you know it? Anyway, have a good one, and I'll see you again soon.